Okay, so Larry just asked a great question off camera, and I want to repeat it before we start the second part. So what exactly went, and Chaim asked the same question, what exactly went through Yishai's mind to think to change the halacha? That if Boaz says it was okay, why would Yishai have any doubts? Right? So one of the doubts is, didn't Boaz die right afterwards? If he died right afterwards, that might be a proof positive, or at least a sign that he was wrong. So that was actually asked this morning by one of my students, and I answered him what I thought was a good answer. Don't ask the question, why did he die right afterwards? How did he live so long? It could have been that his time to go was much earlier, but Hashem actually kept him around in order to impregnate her. But the question is valid, at least in Yishai's mind. If the man dies right afterwards, the next day, so it must have been proof positive that he was wrong. God punished him. Right? Okay, so let's start number Parshat Naso. And you'll find this in chapter 4 of Numbers. And I'll try to sum up the questions the Yakar gives, because they're absolutely fascinating questions and leads us to really fascinating results, conclusions. If you notice, this is chapter 4, verse 21. Why in the world does a chapter, Naso, Parshat Naso, start 21 verses later after, right? I mean, you would assume that
That's not a valid question, because chapters were introduced by the church.
This is exactly why I ask it, and that's going to be the answer. So people should know. Ever since in Europe, medieval Europe, we had things called disputations, where Judaism was put on trial. We always knew our verses through memory. We knew them Baal Peh, by memory. And if someone would ask about a certain verse to another Jew, they would say in the third Aliyah of this particular Parsha, the third or fourth verse of that particular Aliyah. Because the Aliyot, the Parshiot, are divided into 7 different distinct portions. It would be quite easy. Even if you didn't say that, people knew the Torah by memory. But once Judaism was put on trial and there were disputations, in fact you can look up the famous disputation, the Ramban, and a Jew who converted to Christianity. Anyway, you can look that up. So we were put on trial many times, and it became quite easy just to use their chapter and verse when having a discussion, because you're using it for communication. And when the printing press came around, of course, the Bible actually probably was and still is one of the best sellers. I don't know today printing presses, but it's, at least online, it's probably the most looked up and accessed book ever. Yeah.
It's the number one bestseller. People buy it, put it on the shelf, and it's the number one book stolen.
Oh, also? Okay. So, anyway, that's why we're starting on verse 21, a little bit of background. Now, and it's really interesting because Gershon is being counted. Guess what? All you have to do is look back a few sentences, and you see that Kahat was already counted. So, how do we know the order of who's the firstborn, who's the secondborn, who's the thirdborn? So even though in Parshat Naso we're beginning with Gershon, he is the firstborn, and yet we already read and counted Kahat in the end of Bamidbar. So you start with Kahat, the counting of Kahat. In Parshat Naso you're starting with Gershon, who is the firstborn. Now how do we know he's the firstborn? We're going out of order. It's very interesting. Look in chapter 3, verse 17. These were the sons of Levi by their names: Gershon, Kahat, and then Merari. So Gershon was actually the firstborn, and yet he's being counted second, even though he's being counted first in our parsha. He's being counted second altogether. All you have to do is, like I mentioned, you go back to the end of Bamidbar, where chapter 4 begins. Take the census of the sons of Kohat. That's how it begins. So the real question here is, well, he says it should have been, right? It makes sense that Gershon would have been counted first because he's the firstborn. So what exactly needs to be understood here? He explains that the Medrash explains part of it. And the Medrash begins by telling us that because the Holy Ark, the Ark of Testimony, that carried the Torah, was given over as a responsibility for carrying to Kahat. That's why Kahat is first. Because for the honor of the sake of the Holy Torah, for the sake of the Aron HaKodesh. But he says this also is a problem. If that's going to be your answer, Hagufya Kasha, that itself poses a problem. Because what he suggests is, well then why don't you just give Gershon the responsibility for carrying the ark, and then count him first. Don't put Kahat first because he's carrying the ark, and then Gershon, who's really the firstborn, second. Just switch the whole order. Put the responsibility for carrying the ark with Gershon, the firstborn, and then you got no problem. You count Gershon first. Okay. So the Yakar explains that what God really wants to teach you is that how important the Torah is. And how do you know that? Because if Gershon would have been, like we suggested, given the responsibility of carrying the Aron, and then they would have been counted first, you would have said the reason they were counted first is because they were the firstborn, not necessarily because they were carrying the Aron. That would have been your understanding, would have been mine. So he quotes a verse from Mishlei, that's Proverbs chapter 3 verse 35, which says, Kvod Chachamim Yinchalu, that the wise inherit honor. And the rest of the verse is, and fools generate disgrace. And what is all that? Kedei l'lamed dat et ha'am. This is all to get over this concept into the people's consciousness. Shechabdu es lomdei Torah, to honor those who learn the Torah and teach the Torah, and to call holiness for what it's worth, to recognize holiness for what it's worth. And this is the way that Kahat was counted first, on account of the fact that they carried the Word of God. That's what they did. They carried the Word of God. You know, when you see a Talmud Chacham, a sage, you say to yourself, this is a living Sefer Torah. This is a Torah scroll. It's alive. Whereas if the Aron HaKodesh, who carries the Torah, would have been given over to the firstborn, to Gershon, so I would have said it's on account of what? Shavur HaBachorim Anatchila. It was only because they were the firstborn they were counted first. And then I would not have put importance on the Torah itself. This is a continuation we spoke about earlier, about the oral Torah being so significant and celebrating the Torah itself. So here it fits in so nice that this Parsha falls out this year, probably every other year as well, on Shavuos. Therefore, the Aron, the Holy Ark, was given over to Kahat. He should be counted first, in order that everyone should give honor to those who, to the Torah and those who learn it. Now this is where where it really gets interesting, and I'll try to go slower now in the text. The Bala Medrash, right, in the Medrash itself, it brings down a very important verse that relates to this Parsha. Now we don't always see it until they draw it out for us. And this you'll find it's the same Proverbs, chapter 3, but it's verse 15. It's talking about the Torah. It's talking about wisdom. And it says that it's Yakar, Yakarahi Mipninim. It's more precious than pearls. That the Torah is more precious than pearls. Now we're going to focus on this one word. We know now that it's more chashiv, it's more important, it's more what? Than pearls. What is the word we're using for pearls? Right? Pinina. Pininim. Pearls. From pininim. From pearls. It's more precious than pearls. Now this is how the Medrash describes it. This is what the Medrash wants to teach us by using this verse. That the Keter Torah, the word Keter again, it's 613 plus 7. The crown of Torah is available to everyone. It's not just to an individual, but it's to the whole nation, number one. And more than that, the king, as we just described, King David represents unbelievable crown, right? It's also the heart of the nation, and it's the heart of the world. Mashiach is the heart. That's why I mentioned in the last segment about all these intricate relationships. It's so that we really understand that the Mashiach is actually able to relate to all mankind. I heard this in the name of Rav Yochanan Zweig, that I don't know what you want to call them, because they're risque, right? Those relationships that happen with Lot and his two daughters, and Yehuda and Tamar. There's some risque parts to these relationships. Even Boaz and Ruth, right? As you may have noticed, right? And now we talked about Yishai a little bit with his wife, and he was silent. That the Mashiach is going to be able to relate not just to the Jewish nation, but his soul relates to the entire mankind. As we said, the word Adam. Adam will relate to every human being on the planet, which at this present moment, it's around 8 billion, right? So, first of all, it says the Keter Torah is Hefker, Mikol. Hefker means it's available. It's not owned by any individual. It's available for everyone to make an acquisition on. So, that's why the Torah, the Aron, the Kodesh, the Holy Ark, was not given to the firstborn, because shelo yeh tifarato, so that we don't blow up his ego and his self-glorification and arrogance by saying, Ani rui leketer Torah yeter mizulato, that I'm more fit to carry the Aron, or I get a special place in Torah more than anybody else because I was the firstborn. And this is something I think every Jew should understand. We are called God's firstborn. Yes, we do have a special place, but it's our job to give it over. That's our responsibility in a responsible way. Okay? We have to be responsible how we give over the Torah to the rest of the world. But it's our job. It doesn't belong only to us. Think about that. That if it was given to the Bechor would say, I must be higher and mighty than everyone else. No, El Hakol Shavim Bo. Everyone is equal in it. Everyone has an opportunity for the Torah. And that's why it says, Yakara hi mipninim. This is what the Medrash is saying, that verse. It's more precious than pearls. Now we don't understand that. At the very end, we will understand what it means by the Bechor. But in the meantime, what about a Kohen Gadol? A Kohen. The Kohanim. The Kohen Gadol goes into the most innermost chambers. What's it called in Hebrew? There's two different ways to refer to it. As Kodesh HaKadoshim, Holy of Holies, or the innermost chamber. And how would you say that? Lifnai ulifnim. So now we understand that word mipninim is a play on the word. Lifnai ulifnim. Right? If you adjust your ear to hearing these words, Lifnai ulifnim, mipninim. It's more precious than the Kohen Gadol who goes in only once a year into the Holy of Holies. It's more precious than let me preface this. There are three crowns, right? There's the crown of Torah, there's the crown of Kahuna, and the crown of kingship. How do we know that? There are three vessels in the tabernacle that have a zar, a crown. And the Medrash explains that these represent the three crowns. The one on the incense altar, that crown represents kahuna, the priesthood. The crown on the bread, on the table of breads, that represents malchut. By the way, since we're on the subject, King David was born in Bethlehem. What's the reason the king, the Mashiach, and has to be born in Bethlehem? And when we say born in Bethlehem, we're talking about David only. The Mashiach today is through David, who was born in Bethlehem. He doesn't have to be born in Bethlehem. Okay, so for those Christians out there that want to read the whole thing very wrong, I just want to correct that for you. It was David who was born in Bethlehem. Why does kingship have to come from Bethlehem? Because it means Beit Lechem, the king, like the president of the United States, or the president of Brazil, or Mexico. The president, the king, he's responsible to make sure that everyone's fed, right? As we know in the Gemara, that says the people used to come every morning to King David and say, "Give us parnasa, help us make money. What should we do?" That's the role of the government. That's the role of the king, right? To provide welfare and assistance. And if they don't, they're not doing their job. Okay, you heard that from me. So that's a little bit of a stickler for today with the corona thing that's going on. But Pninim is talking about the Kohen Gadol, who's Niknas Lifnei Lifnim. He goes in once a year into the most innermost chambers. Ki Keter Kahuna, the way to get the crown of priesthood is only through the seed of Aaron. But when it comes to Torah, it's available to everyone. It's Hefker L'Kol. Everyone has a chance to merit in it. What about, that's why it says, Yakar hi mipnim. And you know why? Because of Keter Malchut, the actual crown of the king. What happens? I mean, I haven't seen a real crown. I've only seen pictures, museums, TV, right? The queen. They're jewels. They're very, what do they call?
Crown jewels.
Crown jewels, there you go. Right? Precious gems, right? So it's more precious than pearls, then even more precious. The Torah is more precious than Keter Malchut. Sheyesh lo zahav v'rav pninim. It's made of gold and has lots of gems. But guess what? Only if you're from the seed of David can you become the king. But when it comes to Keter Torah, the Keter of Torah, Hakol Zochin, everybody can merit. And now, we're talking about the Bachur, because that's how we started off. In Ruth, just imagine, in Ruth, there's a verse that says, Zos lefanim b'Yisrael, in chapter 4, verse 7, when it's talking about the Livrite marriage, right? The Yibum, the Livrite marriage, that this is something that is from former days. This is something that went on within our people for many generations since we left Egypt. So the words are Zos lefanim b'Yisrael. This was first. This was early. So what? Like you're standing in line. Who? How do you tell someone else you're first? Ani lefanecha, or right? You're saying I'm first. So the word first. So what's firstborn? Is the firstborn. That's what the word here, lifanim. So go back to when it says Yakar, Yakarahi mitninim. It's even more precious than pearls. It's even more precious than the firstborn. So we see that the Torah is more precious than the Kohen Gadol, meaning lifnai lifnim, mipninim. It's more precious than the malchut and the kingship that represents by the pninim of the crown, and even more precious than the bachur, who is lifanai, which was first. Ki el bachur ein zocha ki im mi shenoled rishona. The only merit you have to be a firstborn is if you were actually firstborn. Aval Torah hakol zochim. But the Torah is available to everyone. So I want to end the Shavuos. Just know that it's there for you to take. Take advantage. It's there. Find time. Right? Find time on Shavuos especially. But after Shavuos, it's a celebration of the Torah. This is when the nation was born, right? It's true. We left Egypt. It seems like we were really born. We went through the canal and the waters broke, right? But what was the purpose of coming out into this world? Was as we're counting, we're almost finished counting, towards receiving the Torah. Right, the 48 ways, you'll find this in Mishnah and Pirkei Avot, chapter 6, Mishnah 6. There are 48 ways to acquire the Torah. This is what we should have been doing during the Sfirah, counting and going through the different processes and changes and character traits in our life to acquire the Torah. But it's never ending. Start over, or if you haven't started, start now, right? This is the time for change, right? You want to put the corona back in its place. That's my let's finish this thing. Let's put it back in its place. We're talking metaphysically here. I'm not a doctor. I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a virologist. I'm none of those things. I'm a metaphysicist. I have a doctorate in metaphysics. And that's all I can tell you. Let's put the corona, let's put the crown, the Keter Torah, back in its place. Jews out there, there's 613, right? Principles, basically. 613 paths to have an intimate relationship with your Creator. And for the non-Jews, there's 7 overall principles. And I give a series beyond the 7. I suggest you listen to them. I'll put the link down below so you can get more information about that. With that, Hag Sameach, enjoy your cheesecake, but most of all, like we talked about, it's milk, it's the chalavi, it's the fact that a tinok, a child, when it sounds a little bit risque here, when he sucks his mother's breast, he's getting a new taste. We're going to bring a mincha chadashah, we're going to bring a brand new offering on Shavuos, and therefore the Mincha Chadashah is to remind us to make chidushim, to learn Torah as if it's new every time. It should taste just like you've never had this before, and I wish that upon everybody this coming year. So first of all, Hag Sameach, Shabbat Shalom, enjoy Kol Tuv. Have a great life, and welcome home to Torah.
Yiboneh, Yiboneh,